It's been a while since I talked about the banana girl herself, and a patron let me know that she is eating straight sugar, just adding sugar to her fruit juice, a lot of sugar.
I've been adding sugar to my diet for a long time, tablespoons every day. Why don't I have diabetes? Because sugar does not cause diabetes and does not spike your blood sugar levels. Sucrose or table sugar is only moderate on the glycemic index. You can even reverse diabetes on a low-fat, high-sugar diet.
She says she's been doing this for a while. I remember Durian Rider doing it like years ago and, defending it. I guess she was doing it too. I just don't remember. But yeah, the last I heard, she was raw vegan again. So I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate that she includes several studies in the video itself. She also has one in the description. What I don't appreciate is her description of this research. She says sugar does not cause diabetes, implying that these studies conclude that no, they don't. It's correlation. They found a correlation or an association or a lack of association between sugar and diabetes. They say nothing about causal effects. In fact, most, if not all of them, conclude that more research is needed. I don't believe any of these researchers would say, yeah, sure, add heaping spoonfuls of sugar to your fruit juice. Sounds good. But even if she wasn't being so aggressive with her description, even if she was more careful with her wording, if she said something like, studies find no association between sugar and diabetes risk, even that would be misleading. So yeah, let's look at the studies in more detail. I will show you why. Here's the first, there goes my little elephant. Here's the first one she shows, the role of dietary sugars, overweight, and obesity in type 2 diabetes mellitus. And she highlights sucrose intake is associated with a decreased risk of type 2 diabetes. So this is a narrative review. It is not a systematic review, so it's less rigorous. The authors are actually citing two studies for this claim that she highlighted, this one from 2017 and this one from 2019. So the 2017 one is a meta-analysis. It's a meta-analysis of several large cohorts. That's where you follow people over time and you're trying to see if there's an association or not between, sugar and diabetes. The authors note the inherent limitations of cohorts of all observational studies. It's really hard to tease out true associations when there are just so many potential confounders. So, maybe you find a positive correlation between sugar and diabetes. So the more sugar you eat, the higher your risk for diabetes. But maybe that isn't the sugar per se, maybe it's excess calories. People who eat more sugar tend to eat too many calories overall and are overweight. Maybe it's not the sugar itself, but the extra calories and resulting body weight that are increasing the risk for diabetes. Or maybe you find a negative correlation. The more sugar you eat, the lower your risk for diabetes. Well, maybe that's because of the source of the sugar. Maybe people are eating more sugar not from cakes and cookies or just straight sugar in their juice, but from whole fruits and vegetables. This is actually another limitation that the authors mention. The negative correlation they found between sucrose and type 2 diabetes may relate to the increased intake of healthier food sources of sugars other than sugar-sweetened beverages, which themselves show null or protective associations with type 2 diabetes. So yeah, that's a pretty big problem, right? We don't actually know the source of the sugar. Who knows how much of it was in cookies or bundled with lots of fiber in a banana. Reverse causality is another possible explanation, another limitation of studies like these. So the people who are eating less sugar, maybe they are eating less sugar because they're at higher risk for diabetes. So again, not because sugar actually reduces the risk, but because the people who are eating less sugar are already at a higher risk. Then the 2019 study, again, this is the second source we have here from the narrative review from that highlighted text that Freelee showed, claiming that sugar is associated with a decreased risk of diabetes type 2. So this one is also a review of observational studies, so it has the same limitations, including that they can't speak to the source of the sugar. And while they found no association with total sugar, they did with sugar-sweetened beverages. this? Studies that found no relationship between sugar consumption and the development of type 2 diabetes largely investigated glucose or sucrose intake. The majority of research that shows a positive correlation between sugars and the risk of type 2 diabetes focuses particularly on fructose and sugar-sweetened beverages. The inconclusive studies also tended to have a shorter duration, 4 weeks to 6 years follow-up, while the conclusive fructose research tended to have a longer follow-up time of 10 years or more. Therefore, the data shows that when considering sugar's effect on the body and its relationship to type 2 diabetes risk, fructose specifically and sugar-sweetened beverages especially are really what to watch out for. So to be clear, Freelee is using this study and the quote to justify eating table sugar, even though the studies did not control for the source of the sugar. This is why reading the study you're citing, as well as the studies that study is citing, is generally considered a pretty good idea, assuming you actually care, assuming this is more than just views. Someone who cares about more than just views would also be careful not to cherry pick. They wouldn't exclude studies like this large cohort that found a positive correlation between sugar consumption and diabetes, irrespective of caloric intake. Even after controlling for BMI, total sugar intake still exhibits significant, unique, weight-independent, diabetogenic effects. The second study she cites, Sucrose in the Diet of Diabetic Patients, just another carbohydrate, is from 1986. She highlights from the abstract, moderate amount of sucrose taken daily at mealtimes does not cause deterioration in metabolic control in diabetic patients following a high-fiber, low-fat diet. 23 diabetic patients, about half type 1, half type 2. They're randomized to one of two groups, both put on a low-fat, high-fiber diet, but one group is also consuming 45 grams of sugar per day, split up into 15 grams per meal. That's about 3 tablespoons of sugar per day. The study authors found no statistically significant differences with fasting glucose or A1C. So first, it's a study from the 80s. It's a little bit dated. Second, it's small. Third, what does this have to do with causing diabetes? These participants already had diabetes. The third study, metabolic and behavioral effects of a high sucrose diet during weight loss. She quotes, high sucrose content in a hypoenergetic low-fat diet did not adversely affect weight loss, metabolism, plasma lipids, or emotional affect. So again, it's a very small study, pretty old, published almost 30 years ago. Finally, she includes this study in the description, and I searched the title first and couldn't find that exact title. I got this study, which is very similar, but when I check the PMID, the PubMed identifier, it's different from the one that she shares. And when I search the one that she shares, I get the 2017 meta-analysis that we looked at earlier. That is not on Sweden. Malmo, I don't know how you say that. I'm sure it's not Malmo. Anyway, so then I Googled the quote and I just get her. I just get posts from her on Instagram and Facebook quoting this supposed sentence from some study. Anyway, let's just look at the first one that came up, the Swedish one. It's pretty cool, honestly. 26,000 participants from Sweden, Malmo, and they categorized diets based on ratio of sugar to fiber as a way to try and determine the quality of the diet, kind of where the sugar is coming from, right? If there's more fiber, good chance it's coming from whole fruits and vegetables, right? Instead of candy. While the authors did find minimal association between carbohydrate quality and type 2 diabetes, they still concluded the results of this study support the current recommendation of consuming high amounts of dietary fiber and reducing free sugar consumption. Taking all of this together, taking the 4 studies she cites as well as all the studies she didn't cite, it's totally inaccurate to say white sugar does not cause diabetes. However, it's also totally inaccurate to say white sugar does cause diabetes. The evidence is not conclusive either way, and either way is plausible. It's plausible refined sugar itself does not increase diabetes risk as long as calories aren't excessive, but it's also plausible that sugar in and of itself does increase risk regardless of caloric intake. And we should also remember it's not just about diabetes, right? Determining the quality, the health of a food is not just dependent on whether or not it causes diabetes. What about triglycerides? High sugar intake has been linked over and over again to higher triglyceride levels. For instance, this study, the group with the highest sugar consumption had the highest triglyceride levels. Maybe that's because the high sugar group was eating more calories overall, like with diabetes. It doesn't seem like it, because even after controlling for caloric intake, BMI, even saturated fat intake, more sugar was still linked with higher triglycerides. In fact, added sugar had a negative correlation with saturated fat intake. The high sugar group was eating less saturated fat, yet they still had higher triglycerides. And it wasn't just triglycerides. The high sugar group also had worse HDL, and this is not really surprising given numerous studies over decades have linked sugar to dyslipidemia. And while researchers don't know for sure why sugar causes or could cause dyslipidemia, there are several possible mechanisms of action that could explain it. Fructose has been shown to increase de novo lipogenesis in the liver, hepatic triglyceride synthesis, and secretion of very low-density lipoproteins. Fructose also appears to decrease the peripheral clearance of lipids. Now, there are a bunch more studies on sugar and triglycerides, HDL, LDL, and they do not all agree. It's not conclusive by any means, just like with diabetes. So again, maybe the sugar itself raises triglyceride levels or raises LDL or worsens HDL. Maybe it's what often goes along with the sugar: excess calories, excess body fat. Either one is plausible. Possibly the most important takeaway from all of these studies is that not one of them recommends this. Not one of them recommends eating refined sugar or increasing refined sugar intake. Almost all of them recommend following current guidelines that say reduce sugar consumption. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe because sugar provides nothing, like even oil, and oil's healthy. Anyway, I have a whole video on that if you're interested. But yeah, oil has like vitamin E in it. Sugar has literally nothing except for calories. So even if sugar on its own doesn't raise triglycerides, doesn't increase your risk for diabetes, as long as you aren't eating too many calories, you're getting enough fiber, what's the point? What is the point of this? For health? I don't think so. She even has a sugar water. I just watched that with my kids. Man, that movie holds up. She calls it hydrating energy water. It's water, 3 tablespoons of sugar more if you want it sweeter, she says, juice of 1 lemon or lime, and a handful of frozen raspberries. And you can sip it throughout the day. Yeah, I'm sure your teeth really appreciate that, Freelee. I suspect she's doing this either for views or because she needs to, because she's having crazy cravings for sugar. This huge jar of juice is still not sugary enough. If you need to add several tablespoons of sugar to your juice, something is very wrong. And interestingly, intense cravings for sugary things, for sweets, is a symptom of hyperglycemia, diabetes. I'm not saying Freelee has diabetes, to be clear. Honestly, I think what's going on is she's eating a very restricted diet, and often when you eat a very restrictive diet, you end up craving weird things. You know, when I ate a low-fat, high-fruit, raw vegan diet, I loved and craved tomatoes. I could eat pounds of tomatoes in a sitting. Something's wrong there. I do also want to look at this video. This is like the follow-up, what actually causes diabetes. Fat, of course. She also calls insulin resistance lipid lock. I love it. Not as good as lamp oil, but it's pretty good.
For those of you who don't know, insulin resistance is what I like to call lipid lock, where sugar is locked out of the cell. It can't get in there because of the excess fat. Professor Hemsworth, the father of diabetes research, he was at the cutting edge. He actually proved that high-fat diets caused insulin resistance. Isn't this crazy? So we've known for nearly 100 years that high-fat diets cause insulin resistance. And you know what else he found? He found that high-carb diets improve insulin sensitivity. Fat causes type 2 diabetes, not sugar. Why are they hiding this from us?
I'm trying to imagine myself setting up a whiteboard and just saying this person did this without any more detail. Just he proved that fat causes diabetes. The end. Anyway, she bases all of this, you can see the link in the description, on this study, High Carbohydrate Diets and Insulin Efficiency by Dr. Harold Percival Hemsworth from 1934. He gave glucose and insulin to a few healthy young men, I don't know how many, it doesn't say, 2 separate times. So once on a high-fat diet and once on a low-fat diet. So it's 4 tests total per person. You have the high-fat diet glucose test, high-carb diet glucose, high-fat insulin, high-carb insulin. On the high-fat diet, the sugar tolerance was diminished, as indicated by a high degree of hyperglycemia after glucose, whilst on the high-carbohydrate diet, the glucose tolerance was raised. It is evident that on the high-fat diet, insulin takes longer to act and then acts more slowly on the blood sugar than when the subject is given a high-carbohydrate diet. So first, 1934. This is pretty old. Peer review was not even a thing. Second, this is a case series, so it's not a controlled study. There's no randomization. There's no control group. Third, he gave the men straight glucose, not table sugar, sucrose, which is what Freelee's eating. That is half glucose, half fructose. Fourth, and most importantly, the findings here say nothing about the cause of diabetes, which is what Freelee's talking about, that fat causes diabetes. That is not what he says here at all. That's not to knock Dr. Hemsworth and his important work on diabetes, but we've learned a lot in the last 90 years. Namely, that fat in and of itself does not appear to be a cause of diabetes. Certain fats, maybe, saturated fat, trans fat, have been linked to increased risk for diabetes, but on the other hand, polyunsaturated fats seem to be protective. Although recent systematic reviews and meta-analyses call both of these really into question, finding basically no link between saturated fat diabetes or plant fats and diabetes for the most part. And just like with sugar, there are confounding factors. People who eat lots of animal fats probably eat excess calories. They're probably overweight. People who eat lots of polyunsaturated fats, lots of nuts and seeds and avocados, are likely healthy in other ways too. Point is, fat causes diabetes is completely inaccurate, just like when she said sugar doesn't cause diabetes.
Fat causes type 2 diabetes, not sugar. Why are they hiding this from us?
Because they're not. Because nutrition is a whole lot more complex than influencers would have you believe. Instead of asking why are they hiding it from us, ask people like Freelee, why are you doing this? Why are you presenting decades of research with 1934 commentary? Really? Why are you ignoring decades of research? As much as I dislike rather childish videos like these, really simplistic, ridiculous, authoritative videos on nutrition, what she's saying here is it's not really like my problem, I guess, with her diet. My criticism of the way Freelee eats doesn't really have anything to do with diabetes. I personally am not super concerned about sugar intake beyond eating too many calories and becoming obese, not eating enough fiber, and obviously both of those are not issues for Freelee. And cardiovascular disease, again, not really. She doesn't eat a lot of polyunsaturated fat, which appears to be protective, but she also eats very little saturated fat, a lot of fiber. She's very active. My concern has always been with nutrient deficiencies and the diseases that can result from those deficiencies, right? So lack of calcium and osteoporosis, lack of iron and anemia, lack of body fat, lack of, calories and body fat, and amenorrhea, infertility, lack of iodine, and hypothyroidism. A diet like hers increases the risk for all of these very serious conditions and more. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I would love to know your thoughts on sugar and diabetes and fat and lipid lock, of course. Doesn't that sound like some goofy supplement from, I don't know, Dr. Mercola? Well, what do you know? Now, it's not a supplement. It's actually a process, like a coating kind of thing. They're coating, encasing ibuprofen in lipids, locks the pain-relieving power of ibuprofen in a unique lipid formulation. Flarin is the first and only ibuprofen product with this lipid lock formulation. Thanks again, guys. Please do like and subscribe. And thank you so much to everyone who supports the channel here on YouTube and also on Patreon, patreon.com/unnaturalvegan. I do have 2 exclusive videos a month for Tier 2 members and patrons. I do a vlog and I also do a controversial topic, just whatever I feel like talking about. That's it for me. Thanks, guys. New video soon. So this is part of the reason why it takes me so long to get videos out. It takes me long anyway. I do a lot of reading, a lot of relevant reading, but I also sometimes get distracted. So I was reading through the corrections on something on the Hemsworth thing. I come across I don't know, it's made me so happy. Basically, this doctor, Dr. KFD Sweetman, that's his name, Sweetman? He says he came across a couple of references to the treatment of the condition known as premature ejaculation. I know, just bear with me a minute. It seemed to me that both articles dismissed the subject rather summarily without touching upon several important points. Premature ejaculation is not by any means of no consequence. It can be the cause of serious marital maladjustment, causing frigidity on the part of the wife, and from this, antagonism and even open anger in the first offending male. He says there's no cure for this, but there are ways to help make the experience better for both parties, mostly talking about how to make the guy last longer so that the woman can experience some joy. This is from 1947, so, the wording is maybe not how we would word things today, but this just made me like, oh my gosh, back in 1947, this man is saying, no, that this is a concern. We should care about the female experience. Like, what about the wife? The man should not indulge in intercourse if overtired, sick, emotionally upset, or if his wife is obviously in a non-responsive mood. Thank you, sir.